All right, so today we're going deep on a story where charisma and controversy really collide. I'm looking at all these sources you gave me about John Hinckley Jr., the guy who tried to assassinate President Reagan back in 1981.
hmm
And I got to say, it looks like we're trying to figure out if this guy was a visionary or a con artist, grifter or gifted.
It's a question that's been bugging people for decades, and you've given us some seriously interesting stuff to work with here. We've got court documents, articles all about the assassination attempt itself, and even some deep dives into forensic psychiatry, and this thing called extreme overvalued beliefs,
Yes.
which honestly already sounds pretty intense.
Oh, yeah, definitely intense. And then there's that book chapter, Shooting for the Stars. It's like part of a whole collection about controversial figures, right?
Right.
And it all seems to come back to this question. What makes someone do something so drastic? Like, where's the line between ambition and straight-up delusion?
Well, to even start unpacking that, we got to rewind all the way back to 1981.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan's president, right? And picture this. We're outside a hotel in D.C., and John Hinckley Jr. just opens fire.
6 shots. Total chaos. We know from the Wikipedia article, the one on the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, that Reagan was actually hit in the chest. And his press secretary, James Brady, he was seriously wounded, shot in the head.
Yeah.
And then a police officer and a Secret Service agent were also injured. It's kind of a miracle that no one died right there.
It really is. And it's amazing how fast the Secret Service responded. That same Wikipedia article mentions that they were using code names like Rawhide for Reagan and Stagecoach for where it all went down.
What? Yeah.
These code names, they were for fast, secure communication. It really shows just how intense everything was and the super strict protocols they already had in place, even back then.
Yeah, that makes sense. But here's where things get really interesting. Hinckley's motive, it wasn't political at all. This guy was obsessed with Jodie Foster,
Yeah.
the actress, from Taxi Driver.
Exactly. And that detail, it's huge. It feeds right into something our sources talk about, those extreme overvalued beliefs we mentioned earlier.
Right.
So imagine believing something so strongly, even when every single piece of evidence says you're wrong,
Yeah.
and it just consumes you. Like every thought, every action, that's what happened to Hinckley. This belief, it warped into this delusion that, like, if he assassinated the president, he'd somehow impress Jodie Foster.
It's a scary example of how powerful these beliefs can be, especially when they get all tangled up with media. And it takes us right to the trial, which was, a total media circus.
Mm.
Hinckley pleads not guilty by reason of insanity. And man, did that set off a firestorm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Some people looked at that insanity plea and thought, okay, that's legit. But others, they thought he was playing the system, trying to pull a fast one. And you know what's interesting? Our sources actually show both sides of this whole argument. It shows just how messy, how controversial the insanity defense really is. Was Hinckley really mentally ill, or was he just working the system?
Man, it's tough to say. So they actually bought it. Like the jury, they actually went with that.
They did. Not guilty by reason of
I
insanity.
can only imagine what people were thinking, Like the shock.
It was huge, for sure, a real landmark case, and it sparked outrage. A lot of people were furious, especially when you consider the lasting damage from Hinckley's actions. I mean, James Brady, Reagan's press secretary, he actually died years later in 2014, and it was from complications from the shooting.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. One of the sources we have, it's justiceguy.com. They actually call it a possible miscarriage of justice. They think Hinckley knew exactly what he was doing.
So, okay, after the trial, Hinckley goes to a psychiatric hospital, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and I bet a lot of people don't know this, but he actually got out. He was released. And get this, he's been trying to make music, like launch a whole music career. Some sources even talk about him selling his art online.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, does he really care about the music? Or is it just another way to get attention, maybe try to change how people see him?
Yeah, like is it all an act?
It makes you think, is there like a pattern with these people with extreme beliefs? Are they drawn to fame, even like notoriety,
It's a fascinating thought. Like if you're driven by this need for validation, this need to be seen, does that blur the lines between real art and just like a calculated act?
And it's a question that goes way beyond Hinckley, right? Like, think about all the figures throughout history. We still engage with their art, even if their personal lives or beliefs are super messed up. Where's the line? Can you really separate the art from the artist? Enjoy the work without, condoning the person?
Man, that's a tough one. And it feels really relevant to this whole grifter or gifted thing,
Yeah.
right? Like with Hinckley. Was he a visionary, pouring his heart out through music? Or was it all just a game to him? Another way to manipulate people and maybe even make money off of what he did?
It's complicated. It's a real ethical dilemma. Every listener is going to have to grapple with that on their own. There's no easy answer.
Okay, so we've gone through all this stuff. Are we any closer to an answer? Grifter or gifted? John Hinckley Jr., was he some visionary artist or a con man trying to cash in on being infamous? I gotta be honest, with all this information, it's a lot less clear than I thought it'd be.
Exactly. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray area in Hinckley's story. Obviously, he was driven by this powerful delusion. And I mean, it was a delusion fueled by a movie, no less, and this twisted obsession with getting famous. But he also does express himself through music. So it does make you think, can someone like him actually change? Are they capable of, like, genuine self-expression?
It's wild. This story, it touches on so many things. Mental illness, the justice system, fame, even the line between obsession and, like, real inspiration. And it's all packed into the life of this one dude.
And I think the most important thing is that we don't shy away from these conversations, these tough conversations. Hinckley's case, yeah, it's extreme, but it raises these big questions about mental health, how our justice system works, and even how we react to art when it comes from people with a really messed up past.
You've given us so much to think about. What really gets me is how easy it is to get caught up in the story around someone like Hinckley, to just label him as, like, the bad guy or a victim,
Yeah, I get it. But his story reminds us there's always more to the story. There's more to discover, more layers to uncover. And that's what makes exploring this stuff so interesting, so important.
We've only really scratched the surface here, but it feels like we've uncovered a lot. I'm curious, like, what stands out to you about Hinckley? Is he a product of his time or what? Some kind of master manipulator?
Right.
Or just a victim of, like, his own head? Maybe all of the above.
I think it's that complexity,
Yeah.
That he doesn't fit into a neat little box. That's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Mm.
And for anyone listening, like, that's the big question here, right? How do you approach someone like Hinckley? Can you, like, listen to his music and just forget about everything he did?
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's not an easy question. It's like almost a personal thing. You got to wrestle with your own values and beliefs.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what makes this whole grifter or gifted question so interesting. It's not just about Hinckley, it's about us too, the audience, and how we deal with these complicated people who do these messed up things.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly bombarded with these stories, right? People who seem larger than life, who push the limits, who challenge everything. And some we call them visionaries, others we call them frauds. So where's the truth? How do we tell real passion from someone who's just, like, playing us all?
It's a question that goes beyond any one person. It's a challenge to look past the surface, right?
Mm-hmm.
To dig in, question motives, actions, all of it. And maybe, just maybe, by doing that, by questioning, we learn a little something about ourselves too.
It's true.
We've covered a lot of ground here, and honestly, it's been quite a ride. From assassination attempts to the insanity plea to a music career. It's safe to say John Hinckley Jr.'s story is anything but the ordinary.
Definitely not ordinary, no. And it really highlights just how blurry that line can be between grifter and gifted. So, yeah, for everyone out there listening, stay curious, keep asking questions, and don't settle for easy answers.
Great advice. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. I want to thank you for joining us as we try to unpack this really complex, really fascinating case.
Absolutely.
And remember, it's up to each of us to decide, grifter or gifted. It's a question that lingers long after the credits roll.